As you can see, this business is closed now, ever since the shooting occurred.
Nathan, tell me what struck you about purity culture intersecting violence.
We're in Atlanta, Georgia, at the intersection of Piedmont and Chester Ridge. This also happens to be the intersection of purity culture and violence. I'm standing in front of the aromatherapy spa. This is one of the locations where a shooter, March 2020, was apparently shooting some Asian women and other people who were in his way. And at the moment when this happened, we were in the midst of COVID and Asian hate crimes were steadily on the rise. This would be the apex of an Asian hate crime if that's what this was. But in the closer investigation of the shooter, it turned out he had a sex addiction and he just got out of an evangelical sex therapy group. And according to him, he was killing off his temptation. But as I was watching the news stories as they unfolded and discovered that the shooter was relating to purity culture, I strangely found myself empathizing with the shooter. This was a very unexpected emotion for me. First, what I thought was an Asian hate crime turned out to be a confrontation of how I learned sexuality.
You just watched a short video piece that I did over the shootings at the Korean spa back in March 2020 in the Atlanta, Georgia area. As you'll notice, I'm trying a new dynamic camera angle. I'm looking up a little bit. There's something in the foreground. I can see my arms moving a little bit more. Just trying something different. But this is an important subject, and I didn't know when I was going to feature the piece you just saw, but today seemed like a good day. I wanted to wait a little bit for more news to come out before commenting on it, but now's the time. So the Catholic school shooting at a church combines, well, now it's not just a church or just a school. It's now both. And there were earlier news reports relating LGBTQ. There are other news reports that are finding the shooter had a gun possession obsession. So you have the subject of guns. We have the subject of sexuality. We have the subject of school shootings. And so all of these things I think are important because they are themes that currently exist in the zeitgeist in news media. And they all tend to weave together in one way, which doesn't seem to be addressing the root issue, but dancing around it, almost like stirring up just enough to allow enough emotion, but not going all the way in to clear up any distortion. At least that's how it feels to me. However you feel about it is up to you. So for me, the reason why I posted that earlier video clip was, as someone who grew up as a fundamentalist evangelical Christian, what was most disturbing to me was seeing a shooter at that event that seemed more like me versus unlike me. The shooter involved in that event was just came out of an evangelical sex recovery program. And the result of that event, unfortunately, was 8 Asian women who died. And just like the video mentioned, I found myself empathizing more with the man than the women who lost their lives. And this is not about sexism either, but I think it may be. But it was realizing that I was empathizing to someone who was the shooter versus the victims that concerned me, especially being an Asian American man. Why didn't I see them as sisters? This is where sexuality comes into play, because one of the effects of media that we've experienced, not as much now, there's a lot of diversity now, but what happened before had its effects. Because I grew up in Arkansas, in the Bible Belt, I was exposed to media that really didn't show myself as a Filipino American or an Asian man. So I didn't relate that to being the hero of a story. I had envisioned myself as a white guy. And I wrote that in my screenplays. Those were the heroes of my stories. Well, one was was a tree. That was an easy way around it, but you get my point. There is a conditioning that happens with media that objectified women of color in that event for me, to the point where I was not humanizing women of diversity, even being a diverse man, because of the conditioning of media. It wasn't until I went to the Philippines, where I was among nothing but Filipinos. Filipinos were on the billboards, they're on the candy bars, they're on the movies, everything. Only then was I broken out of an old conditioning. I just saw so much more. So that's one part of the narrative that I want to bring into play, of how the repeat of a certain story can be part of the conditioning, like mass shootings. Okay? But what are we missing? There's also a blank of sexuality. We're not seeing a lot of sexuality in the light. A lot of it is shamed into the shadows of pornography, or just like movie scenes. But what has happened to sex education? It's no longer addressing themes like these. It is reduced to something that's clinical. And any effort to have conversations about them in the open tends to be shamed really quickly. Why? Why is that happening? Why is the conversation of sexuality shamed so quickly? I will now show you another clip that talks about the effects of media and sexuality and guns.
What I've learned is lots of the problems we have here in the United States has to do with a lack of sex education. In Sweden, they have a national curriculum on sex education, like we have a national curriculum on math or science. Most kids here, their parents don't talk to them about sex. They don't get sex education in school. So they're on their own. And there's research that says the average American sees porn on the internet by the time they're 10 or 11 years old. In the United States, a kid can see someone's head get blown off as long as he's wearing clothes. These cultural differences were amazing.
So, that conversation that I had a few years ago was very sobering. I really enjoyed using someone else's story than my own because, sometimes we could just pick or choose stories to fit a certain narrative. But when you listen, sometimes conversations come out at you because you're ready for them. I feel like it's more of a embodied alignment than like an internal selective process. So this is why I bring up that story. That story, I feel, came to me as I was addressing the threat of sexuality, and it brought up a real situation. Why, as an American, why am I exposed to more media with shooting people at a younger age, but I'm not exposed to anything that's healthy about sexuality, and so I have to look for it in the world of porn? Why is that? It's like something is, a blockage of shame is keeping us from merging sexuality into the light where it is needed. When we get a healthy modeling of sexuality and how to integrate that, then we do not have to leave it ostracized in shame and result into disembodied acts of violence or of objectification. So here's an interesting statistic for you. I'm sort of jumping around here, but, just bear with me. I'm kind of going off the cuff, and maybe later times when I present it, it'll be more formatted. But as for now, consider America and how it holds sexuality. There is a Evangelism, the evangelicals came from America. They didn't exist elsewhere. It's a very unique American phenomenon, and it's a very interesting one. And then there's also hyperpornography. If you look at the pornography that is outsourced by America, it's more violent. It tends to be more violent than other pornography, like European pornography. So there is a lack of integration of sexuality that takes dark, shadowy forms. And if it's not addressed, things like this will happen. The mass shootings, because that is definitely now modeled over the news over and over and over. So, is it a surprise when it's repeated? But when we try to introduce healthy incorporation of sexuality, it's shamed, and that education is not able to get out, right? So this is the layer that I think it's very important that all of us see. This needs to be part of the conversation, because when it's not, it's bypassing something. It's bypassing something, and we're left at the same emotional distortion without any clarity, offering any orientation. And this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to fill in the gap here, right? Any last thoughts? I think that's the distinction that needs to be made up right now. Not too long ago, if you look back at my posts, I had a conversation with the group. You can look at my Facebook posts. I start off with a poem, and then there's a little dialogue that unfolds, and I bring that up as an example of what self-recognition looks like. When you realize that, there's a layer of projection that's happening that may be distorting my lens, unless I realize that lens is there in the first place, and only then can I include myself in the narrative and make a better, clearer decision or assessment of things, right? So I reference that to bring us back to the effects of media and this conditioning of shame that we have that's affecting our country. If we don't name that shame, that is the lens that causes a distortion that bypasses ourselves from the narrative. And we never have a chance to reconcile sexuality into the light ourselves, right? This is something that needs to happen. And it needs to happen in culture. It needs to be modeled. And I'm hoping that I'm contributing to that with this very dialogue that I'm having with all you and this new dynamic framing. So that's what I'm leaving with you now today. As these unfortunate events happen, and as we find ourselves talking about them, are we including the lens of conditioned shame? A shame that is not only reflected in our culture, in American culture and American media, but may be also reflected in our own bodies. And if what we're seeing out here is conditioning how we're holding ourselves in here, then it's important to know that what may result is a violent war in here, a war of self-hatred, a war of self-love, one trying to jockey for space than the other. And is this something that feels familiar to you, that inner war? Because that is something that we can learn to let go once we identify it, once we see that lens. And I promise you, the division that separates us from in here is what's causing the division out there. So when we learn to let this go, the world out there will look different. That's the whole point of this. So for me, the way I was able to let this go was God, right? You can look at God outside of you, and you can look at God inside of you. Just God. If God is a synonym to benevolence, love, and forgiveness, that's a good one to reference. But for some of you, it may be, God may reference a judgment and a shame. And if so, maybe you have to look at the God within you. And maybe that's a better perspective of how to love yourself. The main thing is love. It's love. Acceptance, openness, and forgiveness, right? So give yourself the chance to feel this in here. I'm going to do that really quick. It's a lifetime. It's a whole lifetime process, but just for an example. I am loving myself now. I'm loving myself now in the ways I'm showing up. Oh, I so wish I was doing something else cinematically and letting that do all the teaching for me, but I have to show up here as me. That's the shift I'm learning, and this is where I'm learning my reconciliation of loving myself. And for those out there who are reconciling their sexuality, who are reconciling the fact that there is a shame lens, and maybe that's the first thing that they see, that we all offer our pieces for whatever they are, and experience love and acceptance, and acknowledgement and dignity, that it's okay if that split is part of me, because I am embraced fully. And so it is. Amen, amen. Okay, that's an example of how to do it. I hope you like this new thing. Maybe I'll try it again. I'll see how it looks. Talk to you guys soon.